And joining us again, he's been here a few times here on the Jay Stevens podcast. Most recently, we talked on Lockstone, but I had to bring him back to my main baby right here to talk about college football wide receivers. But first, I can't say who he is without saying his name. Ryan Roberts of NFL Draft Bible, and some other stuff which we'll talk about here very, very soon. Ryan, how you doing, man?
I'm good, Jay. I'm good, man. Everything's, everything feels like it's going pretty well so far. The state of the world seems like it's not getting much better. At least it's kind of reverting back to the craziness that we spoke about, several months ago now. But I hope everything's going for you, man. How's everything on your side of the world?
Going very, very well, very well. Things are going, I can't complain, Ryan. I really can't complain. It's like you mentioned earlier, it seems like we're going back, but I can't complain. And you can't either, because the last I see the smirk on Ryan's face, the last time Ryan and I talked, I believe it was on Lockstone Buckeyes, and he was kind of praising me. And I appreciate the kind words of Ryan saying, hey, congratulations with Locked On. That's a nice gig. I'm glad you're at the show. Little did I know, and I feel like he knew this when he was talking to me at that time, Ryan is now a host on the Lockstone Podcast Network himself, hosting Lockstone Irish. Congratulations, Ryan. You're already busy enough. You're going to have a kid here soon, I believe, getting no sleep already. Your wife may kill you, but congratulations, man. I'm happy for you.
Appreciate it, Jay. Yeah, we're 11 weeks out from the due date and everything. And it's I actually did not know about Locked On when I talked to you last time. So I wasn't holding anything out on it. It was funny. I told Joe that I was going on Locked On Buckeyes or whatever. He was like, dude, they have an Irish show. And then we looked at it. It had been vacant since like February. So we're like, let's hit them up, see if it happens, man. So it's obviously a big blessing, and it's kind of been a life dream of mine to talk, to cover the Irish to a degree. So it was just a fun opportunity that kind of presented itself in a really short amount of time. So
nice. I love the daily show. It is a grind, different grind than this, with this being 2 days a week. But it's a grind and it's fun because I talk to people like yourself and other hosts, people I normally wouldn't talk to, and it makes my mind be a little bit more creative, and it makes me, oh yeah, here's this idea. I got to write this down. Before I know it, I got 5 or 6 topics for a 30-minute show. So I don't have time to talk about everything. And I'm sure you and Joe are realizing the same thing.
Yeah, man. Yeah, it's definitely different. To varies. It's not even like, honestly, like just getting the topics and trying to fit so much content in a weekly basis, trying to bring on guests, do all that type of stuff. And then also, it's like matching schedules up with the person that you're recording with, because obviously I'm on with Joe, and it's just like I try to do everything as early in the day as possible so the wife doesn't get mad at me, during the night, always doing the podcast stuff. So it's just trying to balance everything right now, man. It's a little tough, but it's a whole lot of fun. I'm really enjoying every step of it.
Good, man. That's good to hear. Let's get to the first way you and I got to connect with the NFL Draft Bible, you analyzing scouts and things like that, and talk about this year's, the upcoming draft, the 2021 draft eligible wide receivers. Last year's class, everyone knows about it. It was amazing. You couldn't really expect it. It was something that was just, it happened. Like, wow, there's this guy, and there's that guy, and there's that guy. There's talent everywhere. This class going into it, many people I think said it could live up to that hype. I don't know. I don't do what you do on a regular basis as far as analyzing receivers or analyzing players. What have you seen with these guys that are eligible to get drafted next year via your evaluations?
Well, I think if we're just comparing it to the 2020 group, like obviously 2020 with Jerry Jeudy and CeeDee Lamb and Henry Ruggs and all those dudes, it's an exceptional class. I would say, though, that I think 2021 is better. I think it's deeper. I think that it is a phenomenal class. Starting at the top with guys like JaMarr Chase and Rondale Moore and Jalen Waddle and all those dudes, all the way down. I feel like there is depth not only through day 2. I feel like you can honestly get guys all the way up until the last day of the draft that are not only going to be really nice players and really key elements to a team, but I think that they can contribute somewhat early, which is really weird to have a class that deep. But I think that this wide receiver group as a whole is living up to expectations, and I think that it is at least an equal to 2020, maybe even more impressive.
That right there is very, very high praise. Before I go any further, I want to ask you quickly, Ryan, let's go top 5. So far, I know we're middle of the season. I know you still have more evaluations to go fully at the end of the season, but who are your top 5 wide receivers? Go 5 through 1 if you could, backwards.
Yeah. So I'll put number 5 going from summer season. I was a big guy on Tamarian Terry from Florida State. He is not Florida State has not done any of their prospects favors this year. So I have to kind of pluck him out of there. I'm going to put Devonta Smith up there at number 5, the Alabama wide receiver, which I know some people are much higher on than I am, but I think that he's enough speed. I think he just kind of checks a lot of boxes. I don't know if he has any 1-2 trait where I say like that guy is going to dominate in that one area, but I think he just does everything so well. So he would be my number 5 right now. Number 4, I would have Rondale Moore from Purdue. He honestly is a top 20 player in this class when he's healthy. There is just some questions now. You know, he decided to opt back in for Purdue, and we have not seen him yet. What is the durability with this smaller framed slot receiver? But on the field, I mean, we saw him against Ohio State as a true freshman, right? Like, this dude is ridiculous. He's just so good. So I'll put him at 4 just to be safe. Yeah, it was an incredible day, obviously, against Ohio State. He's done that every game that he's played with that he's been healthy for. So I'll slot him in there. I think number 3, I would go Rashad Bateman from Minnesota. He was my preseason number 2. He's exactly what I thought he was. He's an incredible route runner. He's nice with hands through contact, nice body control. He just does everything very well. Similar to Devonta Smith in a lot of areas. Just think he's a little bigger, maybe a little more physical. Number 2, Jalen Waddle, who again he's also a guy that's dealing with an injury. He has the dislocated ankle that he's coming back from, but that dude is a playmaker. That is deep speed. He has everything working for him. I feel like every good deep threat that comes out, people try to compare them to Deshaun Jackson, right? Like, I feel like that's kind of the moniker, like, oh, he's Deshaun Jackson. I actually think this kid is kind of like Deshaun Jackson. He is that vertical threat. I think he can do things after the catch. There's a whole lot to like. And then JaMarr Chase is still firmly number 1 for me. I think that kid is special. I think he's a top 10 player in the class. Best wide receiver to come out in a couple years, in my opinion. There's just an alpha mentality to him. He's just so physical and talented. I think that he was the best player in college, best wide receiver in college football last season. And there's obviously he hasn't played this year, so there's nothing that has knocked him down from that for me.
I'm curious, Ryan. You've mentioned JaMarr Chase, Jalen Waddle, Devonta Smith. And I know there's going to be some Buckeye fans that are going to listen to this, and they're going to realize we went 5 through 1. There's no Chris Olave, and they're going to come back at me and say, Jay, why didn't you get on your guy for not talking about an Ohio State guy first? Which I think you kind of lined it up properly. I have my own thoughts about Olave myself, but I'm curious. When you watch Chris Olave play, what do you see, and why is he not in your top 5?
I think Chris Olave is a really solid day 2 player. I think that there is a lot of boxes that he checks off. I think he's one of the best route runners in the class. I think there's a craftiness to him. I think he understands how to attack blind spots. I think that he is just a really solid all-around wide receiver. I'm struggling a little bit with Chris Olave, and I will tell you this just because he's thin-framed, and I don't know if he's going to be the greatest athlete in the world when he tests. So I'm looking at a guy that may lack some physicality combined with maybe not having the dynamic deep speed. So I think that he is more all around solid than having any one trait where I say, hey, I can hang my hat on that. I think in a clear projection, I think that his best spot will be as a really high-end number 2. I don't think that he necessarily has the traits to ever be the unquestioned volume getter in a wide receiver room.
We're on the same page there because the one thing that the Ohio State Buckeyes offense does, and I know you mentioned this earlier about Justin Fields, it's very simplistic. It makes it very simple for Fields and the receivers to get into spots and get into holes in the zone. And with Olave, I'm always curious and nervous when I see him over the middle. Will he get popped? And will that pop knock him out of the game or make him be out for a game or 2? NFL, bigger, faster, stronger. So all those go into it with me when thinking about Olave. Of course, I don't go in depth as you are, but as just me thinking about it myself, the frame. Who else may have a thin frame that you're high on, but you're still cautious on, like Olave, in this upcoming draft?
Well, I think a lot of the same reasons that I put Devonta Smith at number 5 is the same reasons for Chris Olave. He's a very thin-framed guy. We haven't seen a body type like Devonta Smith. You know, he weighs in just a hair over 6'5" and 175 pounds. It's a really odd physical profile that people are going to have to talk about a little bit, because it's when you're projecting guys, you have to project to play against that physicality, the increase in physicality that you're talking about, playing against, NFL defenders. Will Devonta Smith be able to hold up? Will Chris Olave be able to hold up? Those are questions that you have to answer. Now, ultimately, I think they can, because I think that they're both extremely talented movers. So I think that they can do it. Those are two guys that they're like in front of my mind. Those are the thin frame guys. Terrace Marshall Jr. from LSU also is a little thin framed. He's over 6'3", and he's only about 200 pounds or so. Not quite to the degree of a Devonta Smith or Chris Olave, but those are just a couple of guys that immediately come to mind as a little bit of a thinner frame.
What separates JaMarr Chase and Jalen Waddle?
Well, I mean, they're very different. So Jalen Waddle is a guy that's going to play a lot in the slot. I think he can play outside, though, even though he's not the biggest kid in the world. JaMarr Chase, for me, what separates, I think it's and this is something that's a little tough for film evaluators. There is just some mentality that JaMarr Chase wears on his sleeve, this alpha mentality that you cannot really quantify it. You can't look at it and say 4'4", 6 foot and whatever, 3/8. You can't put a number on it, but you see him at the catch point. You see him talking after plays, after catches. He just has something to him where he thinks he's the best on the field. And that's a tough thing to quantify again, but there's just something about him, because week in and week out last year, he was playing against the best corners in college football. Talking about guys like C.J. Henderson and in the playoffs against A.J. Terrell, who was a first-round pick. Like, he's playing against those guys week in and week out, and he's just dominating them. Just because I just think that he thinks he's better than everyone. Which, hey, again, we're not quantifying that, because Jalen Waddle's going to run a lot faster than JaMarr Chase. But when I watch JaMarr Chase, I'm just like, you're an alpha. You're a number one wide receiver. That guy is going to be a 100-catch guy, I think, in the NFL potentially. I think that he can play inside, outside. I think there's just so much to love about JaMarr Chase. And I think that some people are going to look at him and overthink it a little bit again, because they're going to say, he might be in the 4.4s, decent. Is he the biggest guy in the world? Not really. Is he, and they're going to kind of start to question it. But that mentality, that Terrell Owens kind of mentality to him, I think that goes a long way to being a dominant football player.
I'm curious. We'll get back to the players here in a second, Ryan. But I'm curious, when you're evaluating, and you mentioned the testing that players do, testing well, not testing so well. I'm curious, when you are evaluating how a player tests, does that cause you to rise the stock? Let's say a player doesn't test well. Do you lower their stock even though they're good on the field? Or does a bad test how does that weigh in to how you factor evaluations and stuff like that? I'm sorry if I'm confusing you, but I'm just trying to, get the right question and things out.
Yeah, no. It's a great question, because for me, testing is all about verifying things. Okay. So if a guy is a deep threat, if a guy wins vertically a ton, and I'm looking at him and I'm saying that kid is a legit 4.3 athlete, like he is, there's no questions about his athleticism. And he goes to the combine, and let's say it's Jalen Waddle, he runs a 4.3. Like, that doesn't push Jalen Waddle up my board, because that's exactly what I thought he was. But if Jalen Waddle, or, that's just the example I'm using, if Jalen Waddle, being the athlete he is on film, goes to the combine and runs a 4.6, and then I need to go back and maybe take another look. For me, it verifies what I'm seeing, or it says you need to go back to the tape and make sure your eyes are seeing what they're seeing. So it's a check, like that's the last check in the process. Like, yes, or maybe you need to go take a look. If it ever changes my opinion on a player, it just makes certain that I am seeing what I'm seeing.
Gotcha. That makes sense. I got a couple guys written down here. I'm not gonna lie to you. My college football this year has been a lot of Ohio State, a little bit of flipping channels. Not really as far as sitting down watching a game at 12, a game at 3:30, and a game at night, prime time. Staying up late, older I get, doesn't happen as much as I would like. You mentioned Terrace Marshall, Marcus Stevenson out of Houston, and Tamarian Terry. You said he's not in your top 5 anymore. Could you please explain what kind of caliber of prospect they are? Why? Honestly, if you could just focus on also why Terry's not in your top 5.
Oh man, I had a little draft crush on Tamarian Terry in the summer, man. He was, I'm looking at him, I'm like, he's 6'4", 200 plus, and he is a legit 4.3, 4.4 athlete. Like, there's so much to like there, And I ignored some of the things with drop issues. And I'm not fully off of Tamarian Terry, but I'm watching him now, and I'm just like, is he ever going to get there? And it's tough because I think there's so much developmental potential there. I think that he has the ability to be that because we saw it as his redshirt freshman year, redshirt sophomore year. Just playing at Florida State this year, man, has done no favors for him. He still has had some drop issues on film this year. He had a better game against Notre Dame the last game I saw him in. He had like 9 catches for over 100 yards. He looked good. He caught everything that was in his area. So I'm hoping that he could still get there. I'm just a little more tentative on Tamarian Terry and Terrace Marshall. Speaking about him, they're similar players. I don't think Marshall's quite as fast as Terry is, but they're both longer, athletic guys who win vertically. I think Terrace Marshall's just very underrated last year, playing with JaMarr Chase and Justin Jefferson, all those dudes. It's pretty easy to get lost in the shuffle, but he quietly had 13 touchdowns last year, and he has taken his game to a whole other level. I could see him definitely being in the first-round conversation when all is said and done. If he goes to the combine and at 6'3+, runs 4.4s, I think he's pretty safe to assume that he will be in the top 32 of the draft. And then who was the last one that you asked about, Jay? Marquez Stevenson?
Yes, that's it.
Yeah. So he, again, dude, another burner. That dude's a legit 4.3 athlete. Has been playing with some sporadic quarterback play. Derek King was obviously a little better than the Clayton Tune that they have now, a little more of a consistent quarterback. That dude is not a big frame. There is going to be some limitations to him being a high-volume pass receiver. But if for a departmentalized role where you're looking for a guy that can just stretch the field and create big plays, I think Marquez Stevenson with that 4.3 sub 4.4 speed is going to bring a lot to the table for NFL teams.
Who are your top day 2 and day 3 guys that they might be under the radar now, but by the time that the draft comes around, you think they'll be solid day 2, day 3? And I'm not talking about early day 2, early day 3, not the latter half, but early day 2, early day 3. Who do you think could be those guys that we could see at that time when the draft comes around?
I think one guy that I really like a lot that is undervalued to a degree somewhere on day 2, I think Seth Williams from Auburn is really talented. He's that alpha, big body wide receiver, 6'3+, 220+ pounds. He's not incredibly fast, but I think he's pretty flexible. He has a lot of strength to him. He wins at the catch point really well. I think he's your classic boundary wide receiver that has a lot of traits. I think Amir Smith-Marset from Iowa has not had a tremendous start to the year, but he's got a lot of juice to him. He's another one of those classic deep threats, a little more length to him than your traditional guy. Talk about like a Marquez Stevenson type of guy. Reggie Roberson from SMU's another dynamic deep threat that unfortunately is now coming off an ACL tear. So we might not see him until somewhere on day 3, even though he's a day 2 talent for sure. And then I wanted to throw out one guy that's kind of like a super under the radar guy is Rico Bussey Jr., who actually was at North Texas, and he was a part of that North Texas team that went 9-4 a couple years ago. Really talented football player. I was excited about him last year, but unfortunately, he had an ACL tear early on in the season last year, and he missed the whole year. Took the red shirt. Now he's a redshirt senior. He actually transferred to Hawaii for his last year, and really smooth, athletic kid, 6'1", 6'2", somewhere in that range. I don't think that he is an outstanding deep threat. I think he's a high 4.4 kid, though, that has enough. I think that he does some nice things over the middle of the field. I think he's a really, really smooth route runner who understands how to attack leverage. Might not be a guy that you say is a guy that can, really dominate in any one area. But I think that Rico Bussey is definitely a guy on day 3 that has a lot of value to him.
Before we go, Ryan, before we wrap this up, I got to ask you about a couple guys. They're not in this draft class, but they'll potentially be in the one in 2022. David Bell, Garrett Wilson. Have at it. Say whatever you want.
I'll say first time I heard about David Bell actually was when he was a senior in high school because he's an Indiana guy and Notre Dame didn't offer him. And I don't think his grades were quite up to par, even though he's at Purdue, which is a pretty good school. Yeah, so I can't imagine that they're bad in any way. So Notre Dame did not offer him, though. He was a top-ranked player in Indiana when he came out. And actually somebody at NFL Draft Bible that I work with told me that David Bell was their guy. You need to watch out for this guy as a freshman. I'm like, I know who David Bell is, but I'll tell you what, man, David Bell's pretty good. In the absence of Rondale Moore, he's been really good so far this year as well. I don't think that he's a guy that's dynamic. I wouldn't call him that, but I think that he understands the game really well, really solid hands. He does a lot of things well. And I am excited. I will tell you this. We're talking about like me being a little lower on Chris Olave. I don't think I'm going to be low on Garrett Wilson because that kid is special. He is really special, man. He can, from everything I've seen, he can win on every level of the defense. man, some of those posts he runs are just, he looks like a blur. He's got great body control, great hands. Garrett Wilson, I think, is going to be one of the top 2022 players in general, maybe not just wide receivers. He looks like he is the real deal. So I know Ohio State fans are very excited about that kid.
Oh, dude, they love him. And with David Bell, I'll close out with this. My brother used to be an assistant coach, volunteer coach at the high school David Bell played at. And it was David Bell's freshman year. So my brother came home and was like, hey, man, they got this dude. He's a receiver. He's a freshman, but he's cold. I said, Jeremy, he's a freshman. I don't care what you want to say. Warren Central doesn't have a good quarterback like that. So I went to some games. And I was able to be on the sidelines for those games. Dude, it didn't take very, very long to realize as a freshman, he could beat anybody across from him. It didn't matter the route. It didn't matter what kind of defense was there. You know, high school, they're not going to go great schemes. They're trying to be very, very simplistic for their players, but it didn't matter. He could get anything. My brother said, oh, you think he's going to the league? I said, Jeremy, he hasn't played a college game. This is after high school. Said he hasn't played a college game yet. Like, I don't know. And the jump from even at the high level high school he went to going up to Big Ten to Purdue, I don't know what to expect from the guy. He keeps blowing people away. There's a local writer here in Indianapolis who keeps raving about David Bell. I'm like, he is that good. Garrett Wilson, he had that catch. He had that catch against Clemson. I believe it was against AJ Terrell in the Fiesta Bowl. And I'm like, dude, I think he got a 40-inch vert. That's like 45. That's not normal.
I was about to say that. Has he landed yet on that one, man? That was insane. I couldn't believe it.
Dude, I'm sitting here like in the game. I know whatever happened with Ohio State, but Garrett Wilson kind of solidified himself like, hey, throw the ball up. I don't care where I am. Throw it up. I can catch it. And we're seeing this year with Justin Fields, him and Fields together, that connection. It's lethal. Ryan, any last comments you want to make about the draft class? Then also about the receivers, then also let people know they can connect with you via social media and then catch anything you're doing.
Yeah, I mean, if I just want to leave you with, again, like I think that this class is probably the strongest class positionally in the entire 2021 NFL draft. And I'll tell you, man, I've had a ton of fun watching this class so far just because I think it's so special. And that's just the class in general, not just the wide receivers. So that is high praise to say that how good this wide receiver class is comparative to the rest of the class. And if you want any further breakdown on the class in general, NFL Draft Bible is definitely the place to find all the information I post. I'm at Rise and Draft on Twitter. We also have the Believe in NFL Draft Prospect podcast, which we break down players each week. Also give you some interviews. So definitely check that on the Believe Podcast Network. Then if you want to check out some Irish news, some Notre Dame football fandom, whatever it is, also Lockstone Irish as well. Got to plug in there. But definitely as far as NFL draft stuff, check out the podcast. Check out NFL Draft Bible. We have everything covered there. Rise and Draft on Twitter. Anything that you need at all NFL draft-wise.
Thank you, Ryan, so much. Great insight, a lot of fun. You and I will connect here soon again on one of the shows you or I do to have some fun and talk ball again, man. Thanks so much for coming back on This My Baby, the Jay Stevens podcast.
Absolutely, man. And when Notre Dame plays Ohio State in the playoffs, we definitely have to have you on the podcast for sure.
I got you.